Hello and welcome back to Watercolor Workshop. This week I had a bit of a disaster in my paint. I tried to rescue it, but we'll see if you think that works out or not. Starting off with a very simple drawing. As you can see, a few lines across the middle and some little oval shapes for trees. I've wet the top of the paper with a flat brush. And I've got some phthalo blue, which is quite strong, so I've put a tiny amount of the burnt sienna style colour into it to desaturate it a little bit. And I'm using my mop brush to drop the paint wet into wet paint onto the wet paper. The paper this week is a sea white watercolour block, which is 25% cotton. It's a cold press. It's 20 centimetres or 8 inches square. So I've got a blue sky and I'm dabbing out some areas to act as white clouds. And then I'm just reinforcing the bottom of the white clouds with a bit of the blue. Now none of this gives me a reasonable sky. I just dropped on some clean water there just to randomise the clouds a little bit. Tilt the block rather, then dab out the really messy bits. Now I would let that dry, and usually that would give me a fairly decent randomish sky. So there you saw me cleaning my palette area, and I've got some yellow, a very bright yellow. And I'm going to paint the fields in this, so I'm using my mop brush again. This time it's wet paint onto dry paper. So I'm painting the whole of the field area. I'm not trying to keep inside any lines. It's not an accurate drawing. They're just guides. And there we go. Because I'm using quite a big brush, it's quite a quick process to paint the field area. Now I've got some quinacridone gold. And it's a little bit wet, and I'm dropping it into the wet area of the field. And as you can see, it runs up the page to give me the start of some plant shapes. Now I've let the painting dry. As you can see, the colours are nowhere near as bright as when I put them on. I'm mixing the blue and the yellow together to give me a green. I'm going to paint on the little oval shapes. These are obviously tree canopies. So I've switched now to a number 8 medium sized round brush. This is a synthetic brush. Just paint those wet onto the dry paper. Next I am thickening the yellow puddle with some neat paint to make a creamy consistency, and I am painting the top half of the tree canopy. Now the idea here is that the yellow paint will run down into the wet green paint, and my yellow area or green area will mix together and I'll get a more natural look. Next I am repainting the yellow field. I felt that it had faded so much into the paper. I wanted to bring back the vibrant yellow. Now because the green of the tree is still wet, I'm trying to paint around it, but I can't help touching the yellow paint against the green. And it turns out to be a fortunate mistake, a happy accident, because the green runs into the yellow and it develops into some much more realistic branch looking structures than I could have painted myself. You'll see that develop as the painting progresses. So there I was adding some of the sienna, the brown colour, into the green to give a darker olive green, which I then dropped into the bottom of each tree to give myself some natural shading colour. Now I'm mixing up quite a bright green here, and I'm painting the distant stripe. I can't decide if this is a hill or a strip of trees. It doesn't really matter, it's just a distant stripe to add some perspective, to give a bit of depth to the painting. So then, when my green was on, I ran some blue over the top of it, hoping that they will merge together. Next, I've mixed up a brown. This is the burnt sienna style colour. It's actually called Watercolor Gone Wrong, with my green puddle to give myself a browny colour. And just painted some simple lines to represent the trunks receding into the distance. And then I'm going to paint the near tree as well. And you can see how the green colour has merged into the yellow and giving me a tree canopy. So sometimes mistakes happen, and they're good. Next, I'm re-wetting the bottom section of the paint, and I did that with a wide brush there. I'm reinforcing the brown areas along the bottom. And again, because the paper's wet and I'm dropping wet paint into it, it's flowing up and making these little shades which are very reminiscent of plants. I'm repeating the brown colour under the trees to give the suggestion of shadows under the tree canopy. Just wipe away that splash there. Bit more splatter. So as you can see, I'm kind of just feeling my way along. I'm just trying different things. Now I'm splashing on some clean water with an old bristle brush. And I'm using that bristle brush, it's damp, to soften that edge. I'm just dabbing away some of the brown orange colour there with my finger. Why not? Now I am scratching some grass shapes into the foreground with my fingernail. So all of this is to provide a little bit of extra texture to the foreground. Next I'm painting this line across. It's a dark colour, just mixing whatever's on my palette together to make it dark. And then I am continually having to reinforce areas because this is a cotton paper. It seems to suck the paint up more than I'm used to. I normally use a cellulose, and it keeps sucking the colours out of the painting, which I'm not that keen on, if I'm honest. I know everybody says cotton's best, but sometimes for me I find it a bit of a pain. Anyway, I'm reinforcing those colours and now mixing up some brown into my green puddle to get myself quite a dark, almost olivey colour. It looks black as you put it on. Dries as an olive, a dark olive colour. And I am reinforcing the tree trunks rather. The lone tree in the foreground, middle ground more like, and repaint the wall because it's already faded. Okay, so all that's dried, and I'm not that happy with the sky. There's no real white. I normally get some white clouds. Um, when I dab off with the tissue, didn't seem to work this time. So I decided that I'm gonna rework the sky. First of all, I am reinforcing the dark area of the trees. Everything seems to have dried at the same value. Everything's a mid value. There's no dark and there's no light. So I'm trying to put some darks in, and I can't get my lights back. So I'm gonna go for a very stormy sky instead. That's my intention. So first of all, just finish off these trees by dropping some water in, just to soften that dark edge where it meets the mid value. So I've got a bit of a tide mark here, a bit of a harsh line. I'm using my bristle brush, which is wetted with clean water. I'm trying to remove that line, which you can do. Just scrub very gently with a stiff brush, and you should be able to remove any harsh lines. It depends on your paper. And then I am repainting some yellow over the top because in lifting out the lines, you also lift out some of the colour. So as you can see, as I'm going along, I am making mistakes and then try to fix them. And here's the biggest mistake that I made. So first of all, I'm mixing up some blue and red and black, I think that was, to make a very dark colour. I wet the sky. Some of it was tapped on, some of it was painted on, and to give myself a fairly random selection of shapes, which is to represent the clouds. So then I put my mixed up colour, which was quite light at this stage. I painted it into the drop on water, and then I painted it along the bottom of that shape. And I dabbed the tops. Now that's pretty much what I do for all my clouds, and it seems to work okay. Next, I mixed up another black, a much stronger black this time, and now I'm squeezing out the paint out of the mop brush. It's gone into three stripes there because the paper's buckling, even though it's a block. It doesn't stop it from buckling entirely, so you still do get some little valleys and hills. But that's okay, I can just keep moving it around and let the stronger colour paint drift into the wetted area. Back and forth until it's dissipated as best I can get it. I've got a slight edge, a slightly harsh edge, and again I am trying to remove it with my bristle brush, and because it's still quite wet, that does actually work quite well. So that's my rescue job on the cloud area. The buckled paper didn't help. The initial poor clouds didn't really inspire me, and that's the finished result when it's dry. I don't think I rescued it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.